All right, we're back again. Episode 6 of Third Floor Theatrics from beautiful Studio 26. I'm Darren.
I'm Noah.
What's our subject tonight, Noah?
Well, we're going to do another one about the whole episode. We're not going to be splitting it up into 30 minutes each.
Full episode tonight with one topic.
Yeah, and that topic is going to be something that I would say I'm pretty passionate about. I know you are too. We're going to be talking about Marvel, specifically the MCU and also the comics, because I'm pretty versed in the movies, and I know you're really versed in the comics. So I think we can have a lot of good conversations about that.
The Marvel Comics universe.
Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Right. The Marvel, this is, of course, Marvel. You got the TV universe. You got the comics and the films and animation.
Yeah. It's crazy what the movies have done, though. Like, they've pretty much revolutionized modern superhero movies.
Right.
And they took a big gamble on Iron Man, because Iron Man wasn't like a super popular superhero. You had like Superman, Batman,
that's all
Spider-Man.
That's all DC there.
But those were like the main guys that everyone knew about.
Right.
And Iron Man, only really the comic nuts knew about him.
Right. Well,
and they did the movie, and it kind of launched what is now known as the greatest running movie franchise. I don't know what number of movies there are. I think it's close to 20, if not a little bit more.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a ton of them.
Yeah, and the stuff that they've managed to do with that, connecting everything,
right?
Like, it's absolutely unheard of before Marvel came around.
Before Marvel came around.
Yeah, you know what I'm.
I don't know what you're saying, but anyway,
okay.
Marvel's been around for a long time.
The MCU.
Yeah, well, you got to go back also, back before your time. When I was a kid, Marvel was doing stuff that was, they were doing a lot of TV stuff. So there was a Spider-Man TV series that ran in the late 70s, which I as a kid loved. There was a Hulk TV series that ran in the late 70s, early 80s, and that spun off into a couple made-for-TV movies. There was all kind of Marvel cartoons. As a kid, I remember in the mid-'80s, Saturday mornings, you had the Hulk. It was a split up. It was like split. Half the show was the Hulk, and the other half was Spider-Man and Friends.
Was that the one where the Hulk had the afro or something?
The Hulk's never had an afro.
No, there's something.
No, the Hulk
had like crazy hair.
That was the late 70s TV show.
Yeah.
No, the cartoon was the cartoon was the Saturday morning cartoon was, like I said, it was split in half. Yeah, half the episode was a Hulk, half the episode was Spider-Man and Friends, and that was a great show. We all watched that. So you had all that stuff in like the late 70s, early 80s, and then they were doing films. I mean, there was a Captain America made for TV movie. There was a lot of made for TV stuff, excuse me, back in the day, and a lot of made for TV stuff. Then you had the early 90s films. They did like a really low budget Captain America. Probably didn't know that.
No, I didn't.
They did a really low budget Fantastic Four, which was never released. Probably didn't know that. But they were doing really low budget stuff. What really kicked off, and a lot of people don't sort of recognize this, or maybe they do if you're a Marvel comic book nut, the first big budget or bigger budget Marvel films were the Blade films. Remember Blade?
Yeah, I knew. I think they're making a new one too.
They've talked about it for a while.
I know Blade.
Yeah, so Blade was like the first big Marvel thing. I don't know. I mean, they made 3 of them. Wesley Snipes as Blade, and he did a killer job on that. I don't know how successful those were. I mean, obviously they were successful enough because they did 3. Then you had in 2000 you had the first X-Men movie, and that was sort of like people had wanted an X-Men movie for years. So that was huge. That did really well. That spun off into countless sequels.
Yeah, there's a ton of X-Men
Yeah,
movies.
and so where it really broke though, when this is not really part of the Marvel universe, but where it really broke initially was um, Spider-Man, Sam Raimi
Sam
Spider-Man, and that
Raimi.
was 2002, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Those were the best
still my
superhero movies of that time.
right, and they're still my favorite Spider-Man movies. I mean, I've talked about that. There's things about the three Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies that I think are um, where they got it right as far as the comic book goes.
They had like a campiness to them.
Well, they had a campiness, but and they had a style because Sam Raimi, who started out doing a lot of horror films, he has a style, a directing style, things he does. And the Spider-Man's suit looked great. You had the classic villains. A lot of people didn't like Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin mask because it was just so, it was just sort of metal looking, and they didn't like that.
William Dafoe did a great job though.
He's a great actor. But so those three Spider-Man movies were huge. And then, then like you said, Iron Man.
Iron Man is what started like the MCU, the connected universe.
Yeah, the connected universe.
Yeah. And when I say MCU, I mean what is labeled as the Marvel Cinematic Universe, like from Iron Man to like what was it called, Endgame, like
yeah.
And even now past Endgame, like everything is connected in this universe,
right?
And it blows my mind because if like you really dig into it, like it's crazy what they have done with that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's so many other not spinoffs, but there's so many other Marvel Marvel related films that people don't really think about. Like they did a couple Punisher movies.
Yeah.
Well, those weren't really connected to anything.
And they did the Punisher show,
Punisher
on
TV
Netflix
series
with I can't remember that guy's name. John Bernthal.
Right.
I love him as an actor.
He played it great.
Yeah, he did an amazing job as the Punisher. And I hate that they only did one or two seasons.
They only did one, I believe. And then Netflix dropped the whole Marvel thing. But with the Punisher movies, Thomas Jane played Punisher in the first Punisher movie. Well, actually second. There was a Punisher movie made back in the 80s during that weird time where people were making comic book movies, but they weren't making much money, and people were laughing them off. Now they're $1 billion a year industry, probably more than the $1 billion. But so there was an early Punisher movie, but yeah, you had Thomas Jane play the Punisher in one movie. Then they did another one called Punisher Warzone, I believe. It had a different actor. I've never even seen that one. But there's a lot of stuff that's Marvel that people don't realize, like the Men in Black films. Men in Black was a Marvel comic.
I didn't know that.
And it was never tied into any of the superhero stuff, but it was just published by Marvel.
Yeah.
And then, the Punisher stuff, which is pretty, hardcore. It's vigilante street justice. It's not really superhero stuff.
That's what I think that the TV show with Netflix, what they really got right was like the brutality.
Well, and Daredevil was great too.
Yeah, Daredevil was good.
And those two characters have overlapped.
Yeah, they overlapped in.
And they overlapped in the comics too. But yeah, so there's been a lot of other Marvel stuff that people don't really think about because they're not tied in to that.
The MCU.
Yeah, they're not tied into that, so people don't really realize they're Marvel stuff, but they're Marvel related or Marvel properties, I guess you'd say, but they are. The MCU though, yeah, like you said, it's
broken multiple records.
Oh yeah, it's been very successful. They have a formula that they definitely stick with. That's successful. That makes a lot of money. Does really well.
And even when there is something that they're doing and it doesn't, not necessarily working as well as they want, like for example the Thor movies.
Right.
I enjoyed Thor 1 and 2, but that's just because I love the Marvel movies.
Right.
But let's say I didn't enjoy Marvel movies, like I didn't have any kind of bias walking
Right.
into it. I would probably say that those aren't like the best movies.
No, they
Um,
were good, but they weren't great.
yeah. But when Taika Waititi, I love that
Oh,
guy.
he's great. He's a great director.
Yeah.
And
When he came in and redid Thor Ragnarok, he basically changed Thor completely,
the
and
one,
it the way he did it was awesome.
well, there's a lot of humor in that movie
Yeah.
that's not in the first two. Um, I I like that movie a lot.
Hmm.
I don't know if he's directing the next one or not. I
He
think
is,
he
I
is.
believe.
Um,
Lore or not Lore, Thor: Love and Thunder.
right.
They're bringing back Natalie Portman, I
Right.
think it
Right.
is.
I believe so. Yeah, but so I think that that's a very fun movie. I've only seen it once. I own it, but I've not watched it again since I bought it, or well, since I saw it in theaters. But the one thing I sort of have against that somewhat is that, and it's a great movie, but they made it so there's so much comedy in it, and
Hmm.
Thor is not typically a character that's comical.
Yeah, but I think they with the response they got to Thor 1 and 2 and how Thor was in
Right.
like the Avenger movies and stuff, they had to kind of do something with him.
Right.
And they could have done a million different things to change
Right.
him. And I think Taika Waititi nailed it for making it better.
Yeah, it's a good movie. I just, a lot of times I'm a purist when it comes to
Hmm.
like comics, and then when they turn it into a film or TV show, some things they change, and you go, yeah, it makes sense. Um, I feel like
Well, I think that's what they did with the first and second one. And then
so they were a little more
it wasn't responding as well.
they were a little more straightforward. They weren't there wasn't much comedy, and then
Hmm.
the third one had a lot of comedy in it.
Yeah. It was more like what's like Shakespearean almost, like how Thor was, like he was um like with Odin, Loki, and
right.
Asgard. And then
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the next Thor.
mhm,
I kind of sometimes feel like I have Marvel burnout. Like, um, they're all for the most part well made, and they're all fun, and
mhm,
they're all entertaining. If you just go strictly for uh, just entertainment value, they're all they're good.
mhm,
But I feel like it's like, oh, it's another Marvel movie coming out, man. It's like, and there's a few I haven't seen yet. There's a few that I haven't caught in theaters.
mhm.
Um, we just saw the new Spider-Man recently.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. Of course, my favorite part of that was,
No, can't. No, I wouldn't talk about that on here because it is a relatively new movie.
well, it's been out for like 3 weeks.
Well, yeah, but a lot of people still aren't going to the movie theaters.
Well, that's
Like when we went, that was the first time.
let's just say there's nostalgia to
Yeah,
that.
there's a lot of fan service in the
There's a
movie.
nostalgia aspects to that, and that was for me my favorite part of the whole
Mhm.
movie. Um, as a whole, we'll get back with Spider-Man here a little bit. As a whole, like I said, I go back to the Tobey films, Sam Raimi films, because I think they really captured the character the best in those,
Mhm.
and I feel like the casting was the best, and I feel like um, it's a shame they couldn't have made the fourth film like they wanted,
Mhm.
because I think it would have been amazing.
Yeah.
No pun intended, amazing Spider-Man. Um, but those are my favorite. And everybody's got their favorites,
A lot of people, I think the most, like the franchise that gets the most flack is the ones with Andrew Garfield, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah,
And the thing is, Andrew Garfield is an amazing actor. Like
right,
he is truly great at what he does. Like if you don't, if the only thing you've seen him in is the Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2, go watch what's it called? Hacksaw Ridge.
hmm
Go watch that and tell me he's not a great actor. And
well,
really watch the Spider-Man movies and don't judge the plot. Just watch him be an actor
right.
and he's good. So he kind of, I think,
Some of
got
that,
served a bad plot point at
some of it
times.
has. You could blame the writing or the directing or the casting or whatever. If a good actor gets a crappy script,
Hmm.
he's a good actor. But if it's a crappy script, then he can't do a whole lot with
Yeah.
that. He can do as much as he can based on the writing or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, I sort of went into those two Spider-Man movies going, well,
It's not Toby.
it's not Toby, and I remember when they did the second one, there was a lot of hype. They were like, "Oh, this is going to be the ultimate Spider-Man
Yeah, it's
movie."
got Jamie Foxx, but I
Well,
think
they made it. He had sort of a wanky looking suit in that first movie he did. At one point, it had orange lenses and the
mhm.
mask, which they changed about halfway through the film, and I don't think they ever explained it. And it almost looked like a texture of a basketball. His suit had a weird texture and had a weird the stripe design, the blue and red was all weird. The second movie comes around and he has a very comic, accurate suit. So the
Mhm.
suit he used in the second movie he did, Andrew's second movie, was a great looking Spider-Man suit. And you had Rhino, but Rhino looked like crap.
Yeah.
And then it was just wasn't there a Green Goblin in that movie too?
It wasn't.
It
I
was
don't want to say Green Goblin because
he was supposed to be
it was
one of the Green
it was
Goblins,
Harry. Harry what turned into the Green Goblin.
which he
It's not like it wasn't William Dafoe's Green Goblin. Like it wasn't Harry's dad.
well,
Um,
Harry was a Green Goblin in Spider-Man 3 too.
yeah, but when I say Green Goblin, I think of like Harry's dad, Green Goblin,
Right. What you
and
got to
then like,
understand, there's been multiple in the comic world. There's multiple Green Goblins. There's the Hobgoblin,
mhm.
which is another sort of offshoot, sort of Green Goblin type. Flies around on a glider and
Yeah.
stuff.
So
Um,
in that sense, yes, there was a Green Goblin, and it was
I think
weird.
he had like fangs and
Yeah,
spiked
it
teeth.
was weird. And my biggest thing with the Andrew Garfield movies, not necessarily the casting, but just uh, how they made Peter Parker. Peter Parker wasn't some nerdy.
Right. He was too cool in those
Yeah,
movies.
like even when like in the Raimi movies, you see Peter Parker being bullied.
Right.
And then
Right.
one of the opening scenes in the Amazing Spider-Man 1 was it wasn't Peter getting bullied. It was Peter standing up to Flash who was bullying another kid and
Uh-huh.
then Peter got beat up, but
Yeah.
still it wasn't Peter being bullied.
I think
They made him too cool.
well, he was too cool. He wasn't to me.
Skater kid.
He wasn't the right. Um, I don't know if they cast him just because he was. I mean, he is a good actor,
I
but
think it could have pulled off if the writing was different. If it was like I think Andrew Garfield could have played a nerdy kid.
right.
I think he would have done really well with it. But I think just how they perceived him filming and with the writing, like you see him skateboarding down the halls.
Right.
You see him like being real flirty with Gwen.
Yeah.
And in the Raimi movies, when Tobey Maguire is flirting with MJ, it's like you can tell he's an awkward
Oh yeah.
kid. Like he's never done that before. But when
Well,
Andrew Garfield does it, it's like this guy, like
yeah.
he kind of knows what he's
I
doing.
feel like yeah, and so for me, if you look at all three of the Spider-Man series, the Toby, the Andrew, and then the ones now with Tom Holland,
Mhm.
I like the new ones. Like I said, the Toby series will always be my favorite, and I would have just loved a fourth one. I would still love a fourth one if they somehow figure out a way to pull that off.
Well, they're talking about doing stuff
I've
with.
heard the multiverse stuff.
Hmm.
My biggest gripe with the new Spider-Man series, as a fan, as a longtime comic book fan, and I come at that also. It's not just like, oh, they're cool. It's superheroes. It's like, no, for me, it's because it's an art form, and I know a lot of those guys that work in comics who do for Marvel and DC and Dark Horse, and I know some of those guys, and um, I respect them as artists. So for me, it's an art form thing. But coming from being a fan first of the books, which is sort of like where it all starts.
Hmm.
Without the books, you're not going to have the movies or the TV
No.
series or the cartoons or merchandise, nothing. So the comics are that's 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 it. For me. The big problem I have with the new Spider-Man films are they're just. I think Tom's a good actor, and I think he plays Spider-Man well.
Hmm.
Um, but it's the whole, and maybe we'll get this somewhere down the road, but it's the whole tie-in where he's got all this money behind him. He's got these high-tech suits. He's got all this money behind him. Um, and that's not Spider-Man, really. I mean, the core Spider-Man is he's an he's a normal guy. He's an every man. He's poor. He doesn't have money. He lives with his parents are gone. He lives with his aunt. He's dorky. He lives in a crappy apartment. He's always getting crapped on. His life's always falling apart. And I think the problem with the new series is he's a little too easy. So he's like, oh, he's got Iron Man's tech.
Yeah.
He's got Iron Man's money backing him up. And they're fun movies, but they're just not.
They're not.
They're not the essence of what Spider-Man is and should be. Now, if you read the books, in the comics, Spider-Man is now in his 30s. So he's already been married to MJ, and he's become a professor. He doesn't work at the paper anymore. He's a professor. He works for a university. He had his own corporation called, I think it was Parker Industries. So it was kind of like Iron Man. He became sort of that way.
Yeah.
Years later when he was an adult. But in the movies, he's still a kid.
Yeah.
In the current movies, he's still a kid. So I think that all that stuff, they've almost taken stuff that happened way later and crammed it into when he's still a kid, you know. And when he was a kid, he didn't have anything. And he was poor and just, very normal.
I think they did that right with the first Tom Holland movie. Like at the beginning.
Right.
It was friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Right.
And then he meets Tony Stark, and that's when things kind of turn how you just
said.
said.
And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're tying it in.
Yeah, and me being an MCU fan, like, I didn't care as much.
Oh, you loved it, I'm sure.
No, like, I was like, I love Iron Man.
Yeah.
Like, it's cool seeing all these people here. And to me, it was a different take on Spider-Man.
Right.
And it definitely was a different take.
Right.
But yeah, I see what you mean.
Well, I guess I'm just like a purist when it comes to that.
Yeah.
You know, I sort of want to see what I've read in the books for years, and sort of what the basis of the character is I want to kind of see that on the big screen and finally get to see it on the big screen with effects and actors and very cinematic. But this goes back to way before the MCU. This goes back to novels, Stephen King books, and whenever they take a novel or comic book or something and they make it a TV series or movie, stuff always gets changed. And occasionally it's for the better. But, how many times have people who really are into novels, they go, book's better. The book's better. Movie, they ruined it. When they made the movie, they ruined it. This character's wrong. They dropped this whole storyline. They changed this. This character was completely dropped. That's been, Hollywood has a tendency, sometimes for the better, unfortunately, a lot of times for the worse, to take beloved characters and beloved stories and beloved books and series and change it.
Yeah.
And they have that's so common, that's just probably the worst example of that. And this is getting off Marvel Comics for a minute, but probably the worst example of that is I'm a massive Godzilla fan. I've been a Godzilla fan. I have a Godzilla hat on as we speak.
And a Thor t-shirt.
And so there you go, Marvel and Godzilla. But as a longtime Godzilla fan, right? Longtime Godzilla fan. They've all 99% of those all came out of Japan. In the late 90s, they made a Godzilla movie, 1998. We had Matthew Broderick in it. And it came out, and everybody was excited because they're like, oh, man, we're going to get a big budget. This is about 5 years after Jurassic Park. So they go, well, we're going to get a big budget Godzilla film with, high-tech, top-of-the-line, CGI, American effects. It's going to look real. It's going to look believable. People aren't going to laugh. Because people, that don't follow the series, they go, oh, it's guys in rubber suits and miniature buildings, and it's kind of campy. They go, we're gonna prove this is going to be a serious Godzilla film. So they got the guys that did Independence Day, which was a massive hit, massive sci-fi hit. It had explosions, and they blew the White House up, and it was one of these movies, a big spectacle. Will Smith was in that. It was a big hit. And Before Your Time came out in 96. They got the guys to do that. Well, one of those guys, the guys that directed it, was not a Godzilla fan. So they make this big budget movie and they sink all this money into it. and they have tons of merchandise and tons of spinoff, and they totally changed the character. Like the essence of what that character had been for 50 years at that point, or 40 years at that point, or whatever, um, was not right. They totally changed the character. Like they made the character unrecognizable. And I don't mean just in the appearance. It's okay if you change the appearance, but you keep sort of the essence. They made the character basically a big wimp. He was basically a big iguana. I mean, really, and because they based the character in the story off a mutated iguana. He was a giant mutated iguana running around New York. Um, he was scared of everything. He was like scared of tanks. He was scared of helicopters. He would run from them. He didn't have his most famous weapon, which is the radioactive breath. The blue. It's not fire. He's not a dragon, but it's a blue blast of radiation that he blows out that blows stuff up. That's his main weapon.
Yeah.
He didn't have that at all, and they actually killed him off in the movie super easy. And the movie made money. The sad thing is, if it had been called anything but Godzilla, it would have been a fun monster movie.
Yeah.
Like if it would have just been giant lizard on the loose, or if just made up some name, people they would have said. Of course, they would have said it was a Godzilla ripoff, but they would have enjoyed it. But when you change the essence of a character so much that it's unrecognizable, and not just in look alone, but in character, the characteristics of the character, you piss off a lot of people.
Yeah.
People who have grown up and are just diehard fans, they go, "What did you do?" So the movie, and those directors the director and producer, they were getting death threats. I mean, that's how the hardcore fans were like, "You guys ruined this. You had one shot. You ruined it. What have you done?" They were getting death threats.
They ruined my big lizard.
Well, they were getting death threats, and that's totally stupid. That's ridiculous. But I know as a fan, I felt betrayed. Because I saw it in theaters a couple times because I wanted to experience it, but I felt like this is crap, and they got a lot of flack, and I think they were supposed to do 3 of them, and they did 1. If that tells you anything, it didn't go it didn't go past that, and then the owners of Godzilla, Toho, it's a company out of Japan, they sort of said, okay, we're not even going to call it Godzilla, we're just going to call it Zilla. We're not going to put the God on it because it's not him. It's not the character. Yeah. And they actually brought that character back in one of their films and killed him off as a joke. With the Japanese Godzilla killed off the American Godzilla. But that's what happens. Hollywood thinks they know better.
Yeah. And even if
I love the Marvel films, but I just as Spider-Man goes, and I'll go see all the Spider-Man films because I love the character Spider-Man. Yeah. It's one of the great fictional characters of sort of the modern era. But those new films they lack something for me as a pure fan of the character. They just lack something, So
yeah, and I remember growing up watching the Raimi films, and I watched all the Spider-Man films.
Right.
But I don't know. Like I don't know a whole lot about the comics like you do. So
right.
Like for me, I like the Raimi films. I like the Andrew Garfield films. Like even though they have got a lot of flack,
yeah,
I still will sit down and watch them.
Right.
And enjoy it. But I also really like the Tom Holland films just because of the MCU.
Right.
And even if, like, I'm sure I'd like them even if they didn't have any Tony Stark or whatever. Like, that's not the reason I like them. But I don't know. Like, I'm not too picky with Marvel movies just because I like them so much.
Yeah, I think if you don't come from a comic book background, and you don't know sort of like what the original basis was or the original inspiration was, I think you can be that way more. If you just come at it strictly from a movie, if you're just strictly a movie fan and you don't sort of know the backstory or the way it was originally created or how it was originally played out, you can probably enjoy the movies better because, I mean, like I love Lord of the Rings. I'm not even going to comment on that because those movies are great. I mean, they're just.
Never seen Harry Potter either.
I'm not a Harry Potter fan, but so I can't really talk much about Harry, but like Lord of the Rings movies, films, they're these big, epic, huge 3 hour long opus. They're just these huge, epic journey. They're just massive. The story, you just follow it and the characters, and just, I've never read any of the books. You know, the books were written in the 30s, and I know there's people who are fans of the books that say, oh, well, this was changed. That was changed. You know, they split that book up into, for one book, they made 3 movies out of it or something. That was The Hobbit, which were the prequels. But, see, I don't have that background. I didn't read the books. So and that's kind of the way you are with the Marvel films. You don't know the background. You didn't read the comics. You just enjoy the movies for what they are. So, and that's fine too.
Yeah. I get the other half too, because my favorite thing growing up was I loved the Percy Jackson books.
Right. And they did what, 2 movies?
They did 2 movies, and they both were not that good. The books were amazing.
Yeah.
Like, they're not great adult books, I don't think.
Right.
But, like, for the age I was at,
they were like teen books or whatever.
Yeah, I had like all the side books, like Camp Half-Blood Guide and all that kind of stuff. Like, I literally loved those books so much. I did nothing but read those books.
Right.
Like, one time I got in trouble, and I literally got grounded from my books because my parents were like, well, we're not grounding you from TV or Xbox because you're not using those things. The only thing you're doing is the reading.
Right.
So I went to my school and told my teacher that my parents grounded me from reading, and she emailed them.
Oh boy.
Yeah, that was fun.
But no, yeah, see, that's right there. So you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You know, like,
and you got to see too, like, we're not, well, you technically are a filmmaker.
That's right, I am. We almost forgot that.
No, but like,
we're not film. Wait a minute, you are a filmmaker.
But not like theater films, like multi-million-dollar.
Well, no,
budgets.
and you can't even say, I'm going to defend that statement there. We do show our films in theaters, so you can't even say.
I mean, like AMC.
No, and that's only
you know what I was
that's only because we can't afford it. If it was cheaper, we would. Are you listening, AMC? No, I get what you're saying. Multi-million-dollar franchise, huge studio projects. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
And books are one of the greatest mediums because you can put so much stuff in there. You can take your time.
And movies, you can't. You got a 1,000-page Stephen King novel, and you're going to cram it into a 95-minute movie.
Yeah, and
things are going to get cut. I get that.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, when Marvel's Endgame came out,
right?
Avengers Endgame, there were people that were like, "Why is this 3 hours long? Like, that's way too long."
Right.
And I think it honestly should have been longer.
Well,
because there was a lot of stuff. Like, they skipped the whole 5 years of.
They had to.
Well, they didn't have to.
Well, otherwise they would have made a 5-hour movie. And
I would have watched it.
The problem, but you got to understand.
Yeah, a lot of people wouldn't.
It's and that comes down to marketing and money. Mm-hmm. And 3 hours is about the threshold. I mean, a 3-hour movie is a long movie. And this all comes down to we've kind of veered off topic here. But when you're making movies that are, so many movies now are long anyway. There's so many 2-hour plus movies. Being a horror director or not director, but being a horror filmmaker, and actor, and fan, and someone who's produces and has a producing role in horror films. What's great about horror films is that typically you can get a horror film in 90 minutes. It's an hour and a half, and you boom, 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 you're done, and it's a good short little ride, and and whereas so many of the bigger films now are 2 hours and 45 minutes. And the time you go to the theater, and I love the theater. I love going to the movie theater. But the time you go to the movie theater and you see 20 minutes of previews, you're in there for 3.5 hours. Yeah. And I mean, for me, it's okay because I'm a movie nut. But the general public does not want to sit, unfortunately, because everybody's attention spans are short these days.
Well, they're wrong. I would love, like.
But no, I get what you're saying. And the Endgame films were fun. Was it 2 parts, wasn't it?
They had Endgame Infinity War, or not. They had Marvel Avengers Infinity War. That was where because Thanos had been teased throughout all the movies. But he really became a thing in Infinity War.
Right.
And that was, of course, where we finally saw our heroes lose.
Yeah. Well, that was part 1, right?
Of the. I don't know if it was a part 1.
Well, they did. There was 2. There was 2. There was 2 films at the end there, the last 2 Avengers films.
Yeah, Infinity War and Endgame.
Right, those were it's like the big 2-part.
Yeah, they didn't label them as parts, but I guess
they were.
Yeah.
They were.
But yeah, it was something that I walked out of the theater at the end of it, and me and all my friends
were crying.
Like, we weren't crying. We were like, "What the hell?" Like, because we had never seen like that. We would have never guessed. And then Endgame, I think they did a good job of kind of wrapping.
Let me tell you something. You know why that was not shocking to me as a comic book fan?
Because you already knew it was going to happen.
Well, not so much that, but it's a pretty much a cliche in comic books that they kill people off, and sometimes they'll keep them dead for a few years, and then they bring them back. And say, oh, we're going to kill off. They crippled Batman. He came back. They killed Superman. He came back. Peter Parker's disappeared and been supposedly dead at times. They killed off the Hulk. Captain America got assassinated at one point, and so as a comic, and this goes back to being a comic book reader, not just a film fan. Mm-hmm. We've all seen that before, so we're like, oh, they're killing these guys. Well, yeah, most of them come back. So even if you film fans may have not known that, mm-hmm. but comic book readers go, hold on, guys, don't worry, but they're going to come back.
But with the MCU and with what they did, getting rid of Iron Man,
right,
and Chris Evans as Captain America, the thing is with those people, it's not a comic book where you can just rewrite another one and draw them in the same likeness.
And that boils down to casting. Because you go,
contracts, and that's what I was getting at.
Contracts, and you go, I'm a huge Hugh Jackman Wolverine fan. I think Wolverine's one of my all-time favorite fictional characters. Mm-hmm. And, of course, very popular, and Hugh's a great actor, and Hugh did a great job as Wolverine. Mm-hmm. But he said, I've played this character now for 20 years. I think he was in 9 or 10 movies altogether as Wolverine. Mm-hmm. And he's like, I'm getting older. It's really, really hard to get in the kind of shape I need to be in these movies. So you either recast and just say it's Wolverine and it's a different guy playing it, or you kill him off. So in the films, it's easier to kill them off and say, well, they're gone, because the mm-hmm. actors don't want to play it anymore. Yeah. They don't want to do. They've done it and they're ready to move on or whatever. But
yeah, I don't know. Like,
as a whole, the MCU it's an achievement, and it is an achievement, and it's pop culture, and they're popcorn movies. I mean, a lot of people, and this has been a more recent, a lot of the real hardcore serious directors hate comic book movies because they say, mm-hmm. They're popcorn films. They're entertainment. There's no merit. There's no social, they're just for fun. And it's like, okay, well, what's wrong with that? What if they are just for fun? Who gives a crap? If you go into a theater and you enjoy the film and you had fun and it made you feel good or it made you laugh, or who cares? Mm-hmm. Not every film has to have some social meaning, some big social message that, so I defend, of course, I'm a comic book nut and a sci-fi nut and all that, so I'll defend them anyway, but I'll defend them as entertainment. If all they are at the end of the day is just fun and entertainment, mm-hmm. there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, and that's in my opinion, the great thing about the MCU. Like, you can pick out any of the movies, maybe not Endgame, because Endgame was kind of, it wrapped everything up.
Right,
like,
it wrapped the whole thing up.
You kind of had to know a little bit of your stuff. But pretty much any other one, you could have showed any of those movies to anyone, and they more than likely would be like, yeah, that was a good movie.
Right.
But the great thing about it is, if you take the time to watch every single movie and pay attention to it, the whole piece together is something that hasn't been done before.
Right.
Like, it is truly amazing. And for them to be able to connect all of those movies together like that, but also make each movie accessible to anyone that wants to watch it, is truly amazing.
There's people who won't watch let's say the Thor movies because they don't like Thor, but they love Iron Man. Mm-hmm. And so you can watch any of them. You don't have to watch. You can watch all of them. Now you may not know what's going on if it's a big connected story arc.
Yeah.
But you can sit down and it's like, I love Iron Man. I'm going to watch all the Iron Man films. I don't like Thor. Well, you know, you don't really. You can you may miss some pieces.
Yeah.
Because they do connect. But if you just like,
but overall, you'll still enjoy
you still have
the
fun
movie.
with it. And I think, you know, I think that, like I said, there's always going to be a difference between TV shows and comics and animation and the movies. There's always going to be, and some people will prefer the TV series, like the Netflix stuff that was going on. And some people will prefer the movies, and some people are just a purist and they go, "Alls I read is the books. I don't watch any of the movies." There's, you know, so everybody has their own preference. Some people watch all of it. Some people watch everything that comes out that's Marvel. Read, you know, that's it's so vast that it's you know, especially with the books, it's so vast. There's so much out that comes out every month that it's just, you know.
Yeah, I think because you haven't seen any of the Marvel TV shows, not the ones on Netflix, but the ones on Disney Plus, like Loki.
No, and honestly, I don't have any desire to see Loki.
See, those are good.
I've heard they're good.
Those are really good.
Here's the thing, and this is like, even though I'm a big fan of all that stuff, like, I have to really like the characters, or I don't care. Like, even though I have a 30 some plus year comic book collection, and I've spent way too much money on comics and merchandise and all this over the years, because it's been one of my hobbies since I was a kid. Like, you know, everybody said Loki was great. Everybody said that what was
Tom Hiddleston.
Yeah, but what was the other series that was popular? Scarlet Witch and
WandaVision.
Yeah,
I wasn't a big fan of that.
Well, everybody said it was great, and you know, then there's that, and then there's, you know, and then well, see, I didn't see a lot of
the Falcon and the Winter Soldier was the other one.
Yeah, I haven't seen that, and I like
that one was good. It was weird though seeing someone else as Captain America.
Well, that goes back to the books.
Yeah,
because in the books, the first time Steve disappeared or was killed or whatever, Wally or Bucky took over. So he was the first Captain America replacement. And then after that, it was Falcon took over for a while. And then, of course, Steve came back. So all this stuff that we've read in the comics as readers, you know, everybody's seen it for the first time on TV or whatever. We've already seen it. But no, there's a lot of the Netflix series I didn't see. Like, I didn't see the Punisher series. I didn't see a lot of the Daredevil series. I didn't see
Iron Fist.
Iron Fist. I didn't see
Jessica Jones.
I didn't see that one.
I think that was what it was called.
Yeah, I didn't see
Luke
those.
Cage.
Didn't see Luke Cage. I didn't see any of those.
No,
I haven't seen WandaVision.
I didn't see those except Punisher and Daredevil.
Yeah, and so, like, Loki's okay. I like, you know, Loki's an okay character within the Thor, but I don't really have a desire to just. It's like I really like. I haven't like this is not Marvel. This is DC. But like, people are like, oh, you got to see that. You got to see the Suicide Squad movies. I haven't seen either one of them. Now we have a copy of the first one.
Second one is really good,
and I know the second one's a lot more wacky.
It's good,
but and I know Will Smith's in the first one. I love Will Smith, but I'm not a fan really of any of those. Now, if I sat down and watched them, I probably would enjoy them at the end of the day. And sometimes that's what happens. I'll see a movie and I'll go, man, you know, I should have watched that. I should have watched that when it came out a year ago because I would have liked it. But I'm just so like I love the Spider-Man stuff. I love, of course, this is once again not Marvel, but the Batman stuff for the most part. I sort of stick to the characters for the most part that I love. You know, now with Marvel, I've seen a lot of other stuff. Like, I've never been a big Iron Man fan, but I love the movies. The movies were great, and that's, you know, a lot of that has to do with Robert Downey Jr. being a hell of an actor. You know, a lot of times you get these great actors in, and you go, oh, I just want to see it because he's in it or she's in it or whatever. But
it makes you wonder what would have happened if they would have decided, like, or if they would have made an Iron Man film and it wouldn't have been Robert Downey Jr. Or if it was and the movie just didn't, it wasn't popular. Like, all of this stuff that's happened in the MCU probably wouldn't have taken off.
If the Iron Man films hadn't have blown up, if the first Iron Man film hadn't have blown up, you know, it had a sneak thing at the end. It had a teaser at the end, which was I think was a Hulk tie-in. I think it had to do with I think it had something to do with the Hulk at the very end after the mid-credit scene or whatever was I think. Yeah, if Iron Man would have bombed, the whole series may have went a different direction, or they may
Yeah.
have not been it. They may have, and see, and then see, DC's tried to sort of do this too.
Yeah.
DC wanted to do this, a different way, but they sort of, they did like a couple Superman movies, Superman, Batman, and then all of a sudden Justice League, and
And
it didn't work.
I watched a thing, and it was basically how the Justice League movie, like plot point by plot point, ripped off Avengers.
Yeah.
Like, it was like a 30-minute long video, like just fact after fact of both plot points, like just ripping off of.
Right. We could even do an episode on DC stuff. And,
Yeah.
With DC, I mean, for me, it doesn't almost begin and end, but I'm primarily a Batman fan. And it's like, well, I think Batman is one of the single greatest fictional characters ever created. I mean, he's been around since 1939. We did a whole episode on Batman at some point. But as far as Marvel goes, I think Marvel, they're going to have films that don't do well, and they're going to have films that.
Well, the thing is, like, as big as they've gotten, they could make their film not doing well is still a lot better than most films nowadays.
But I mean, they could even have a couple outright bombs, and it's as a company would still be fine because there's such a. Of course, the mouse is behind all of this. Disney's behind all this, but and that was, I know when Disney bought Marvel, people were freaked out like, oh no, I said, but films have still retained their quality, and there's so much money behind those films now, mostly because a big part of that's because of Disney, obviously, but they could have a couple outright disaster bombs, and as a company would still be fine.
I think their biggest bomb that they had in the MCU was easily Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel.
I know you've talked about that.
That's the one that I will not go back and rewatch.
It actually did really well financially.
But a lot of people after were like, we don't like this. And a lot of people share the same opinion as me. I'm not a fan of Brie Larson.
Oh,
you can if you go and watch the interviews with Brie Larson and other people that were in the MCU,
I've watched
you can tell that they don't like her.
Well, I've watched some of those because you told me to watch them, and I think some of them they were joking around. I don't think all those.
Maybe some of them.
I don't know that they. That's one movie I've not seen because I don't really care about the character. Well, I've seen bits and pieces when it was on TV, but because I'm not a fan of that character, so I just like, Captain Marvel.
Going back to what you were saying about the characters not being a fan of them, I was never a fan of Loki. Like, I liked, he was good in the movies, and he was really good in Ragnarok.
Right.
But going into watching the Loki series, a show just about Loki, I just watched it because it was Marvel. But me not going in there liking Loki, it made you get a whole new appreciation for the character.
Right.
Now he's one of my favorites.
He's a great actor.
Yeah, Tom Hiddleston.
He's a great actor. So a lot of that has to do with the actors.
But the story they put in it was phenomenal.
Right. No, I think if I ever sit down and watch the hell, I may enjoy it too. But it's just one of those. There's so much out there. You really, there's so much stuff that comes out, so much content, movies, TV shows, animation, which we didn't talk a whole lot about. But there's, Marvel does animated series sometimes.
Yeah, they have a new series called, it's not new, but it's called What If, and it's like a play on the multiverse.
And that goes back to the comics. The What If was a series that was around years ago. But, there's so much content that comes out with the movies, the TV shows, the animation, the cartoons, the comics. They even do novels. Marvel has Spider-Man novels and stuff. There's so much out there that unless you're, and that's all you have to do, you almost can't keep up on all of it. It's too much. There's so much. You kind of
have to pick a medium.
You have to pick and choose.
Yeah.
And for me, I watch a lot of the movies, but see, that goes back to being just a movie nut. And they're big effects movies, and they're big, comics. I mean,
They're harder to get into.
well, no, I wouldn't say that. Comic movies, I was getting ready to say, what I was going to say is comic movies are basically science fiction. Um, Science fiction action films because you have monsters and mutants and aliens. Think
Mm-hmm.
about it. I mean, how many characters are mutants or how many
Yeah.
characters are monsters? I mean, Wolverine is a monster, really.
Mm-hmm.
He's like a, you know, he's like,
Like Freddy Krueger.
well, he's got these blades and he's meaner than hell, and he
Mm-hmm.
looks sort of like a werewolf at times with the hair and you know the comics sometimes they even give him fangs and but comic book movies and comic books in general are it's sci-fi and there's action and then there's the whole space thing and monsters and horror elements. So for me, it all kind of goes together anyway, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to kind of pick and choose unless unless you don't leave your house.
Cough, cough, me.
Yeah, unless you don't leave your house, maybe you don't have a job or you don't go out much. To sit down and watch every series, every movie, every you couldn't do it. So
You'd have to be like a super fan.
and even that, it's like you almost couldn't even have a social life or a family because all
Well,
you're
I
doing
don't
is
know if I
watching
would.
what a super
Maybe,
fan.
maybe if you were like, I've taken the time to watch all the Marvel movies and the shows and stuff. I haven't seen every single thing like that.
That's what I'm
Like
saying
the
though.
older stuff,
But to
like
catch
because
everything,
a lot of the stuff though, like some of the animated stuff,
it's
it
older,
it's either older or it's made like for kids
right?
now. But like all the MCU stuff, including the shows, everything like that, I've seen,
Right.
and I mean, I don't know, like,
I mean, you know, the thing is, it's like you like I said, you kind of have to pick and choose because there is a ton of it out there. I
mm-hmm,
mean, just a boatload. Um, Overall, I like what they've done. Overall, I'm glad that they've made it. Because I got to tell you, when I was a kid and there was hardly no films or no TV shows. If you were a comic book fan, you were kind of looked down upon. Like, oh, who's
mm-hmm,
this weirdo reading comic books? These weird comics. Now it's like mainstream.
yeah,
And it's so if you're a kid, the merchandise, the level of toys and figures and shirts and posters and just all the memorabilia and merchandise that's out there, along with the TV shows, the movies. It's so mainstream now. It's easier to get into. It's easier to view.
mm-hmm,
It's more accessible than it was back in the day. Um, so I'm glad that it's. I'm glad it's more mainstream. There's sort of like I mean, you can go back to when I was 16, really getting into comic books and really
mm-hmm,
becoming a fan of that art form. And you didn't have all the movies and TV shows. It was kind of nice to feel like you were in like a little private club.
yeah,
To like, oh, there's only so many of us that collect comics. The mainstream, most people aren't into comics, so it was kind of nice to be in the day back in the day to feel like you were in like a little private exclusive club. Whereas now
mm-hmm,
it's like everywhere.
yeah,
People who don't even read comics know the movies,
mm-hmm,
kind of like you.
yeah,
Um, But overall, I'm glad what they've done. I'm glad they've made it more accessible to people. I'm glad
mm-hmm,
kids have more of a place to see stuff, and because it is great fiction,
yeah,
it is good fiction, and there are some um, positive things you can sort of learn and from that type of fiction.
it's like larger than life movies.
Yeah, and they're just fun. Like I said earlier, if they're just popcorn movies, entertainment, who cares? That's that alone is worth something. It's worth something to for people who can sit back and watch a movie and forget about for 2 hours their troubles or their job or their financial situation or just how crappy the news can be. And you just sit back for 2 hours and you enjoy some over the top, bigger, larger than life film. That's a positive thing. There's, that is a noble thing to be able to
Mm-hmm.
entertain people and let them forget about their lives for 2 hours. I really wish, and a side note, we can talk about this on another episode. I wish DC would find a successful um, formula because I think they've done some really good stuff. DC's stuff has been more successful on TV and on animation.
Mm-hmm. Well,
And
TV.
there has been some successful movies, but overall their movies don't compare to anywhere near what
No.
Marvel has done.
The the thing with the TV, when they did like Flash and Arrow,
Mhm.
the first few seasons of those shows
Yeah.
were good. And then the CW, the company
Yeah.
that runs it all, started it. They ruined them. And Supergirl was bad off the rip. It's like it's not good. But Arrow and Flash.
That's your opinion.
Well, it's fact.
Hey, when that show lasted 3 or 4 years,
Well,
so it had to have some viewership.
not really compared to a lot of.
But you got it. But I mean, I'm just telling you, if a show has no viewership, it'll get cut. Like they can cut a show 5 episodes in and say, look, we're cutting this, and for it to run 3 or 4 years, it had to have somebody watching it. It had to.
Yeah, somebody is in singular.
No, I mean seriously, you and this goes back to the Marvel universe. If those movies didn't succeed, you wouldn't have half of the movies that have been made now with Marvel. If those movies bombed outright, it would have been more of a niche market, more of a cult thing. Now it's mainstream, so you have to have the viewership. And I don't follow the DC TV series. I did watch Flash a little bit when it first came on, and I was like, I like Flash's character, okay.
He's my favorite superhero growing up.
But what DC's done, we're getting off topic again.
Well, hang on a second. Let me finish what I was going to say.
Okay, go ahead.
The thing that the CW did that a lot of people have talked about is they gave everyone a superhero, and they were very inconsistent. They turned Arrow, The Flash, Supergirl, all of those shows into basically garbage. Like they were inconsistent. Everyone all of a sudden got a superpower, and like it was not good. So those had potential, like with those superhero
But
shows,
you also
because they
gotta
started off good. And then
But you also got to
turned out
understand
bad.
those characters they've been around. They didn't just make those up for TV. Like the Arrow, Green Arrow has been around. DC's been around a lot longer than Marvel.
Yeah.
So a lot of the stuff, that it wasn't like, oh, let's make this show called Arrow. Let's rip off Hawkeye. No, Green Arrow came first.
Yeah, I know.
But I get what you're saying. What DC's excelled at TV wise has been stuff on like HBO Max and a lot of their streaming series. That's where DC's really excelled. Like Swamp Thing and Titans is still going. Doom Patrol is one of the craziest. It's very adult, very mature, but it's so well written, so well casted. And I think I've talked about that before somewhere. It seems like Doom Patrol.
I think you talked to me about it.
So DC has their strong points, but as far as the films go, they don't compare to Marvel.
No.
They just and I hope someday they will, because I think DC has a lot to offer.
They have a lot of great superheroes.
I mean,
and
there's
like Man of Steel. I didn't mind those films, but like when you really look at Superman, the character,
they made him way too dark.
Yeah.
And that we could talk a whole episode on how I think they ruined Superman in those.
I love Henry Cavill though.
He's a good actor.
Yeah,
but Superman's not dark. They even made his suit sort of darker.
Yeah.
And
I thought it looked cool.
Well, they did that because they said, well, if it's too bright, it looks silly. So we'll make it dark red and dark blue and dinge it up. But anyway, we'll talk about DC in a future episode. Maybe we'll do another comic book or another, because there's other stuff we haven't talked about too. Other
yeah,
like the Hellboy films.
Yeah,
those are
scratched the surface.
Those are Dark Horse comics, and there's stuff from Image Comics, and there's Spawn, and there's tons and tons of comic book related stuff that aren't Marvel. There is so much more out there than Marvel. People need to realize that Marvel's not the only one. That's the only game in town. There's a lot more out there. But
so one thing I want to end with, gonna kind of put you on the spot here.
Here we go.
Is since the main topic was Marvel,
right?
What is your favorite Marvel movie that you would recommend to somebody?
Let's see.
For the average Joe.
I don't know. I mean, I think Civil War was great.
See, I don't know if that would be a good one for the average Joe, because like you kind of had to know a little bit for that.
Okay. Yeah, there's part of a bigger story arc. I don't know. I'm biased towards the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man films.
Those are good.
Because it's just, to me, they're pretty accurate. There's certain things they changed, obviously, but they're pretty accurate as far as the basis of the characters. I mean, I'm just biased. I say Tobey Maguire Spider-Man all day long. I mean, that's just,
Yeah.
And the first Iron Man's great.
It is.
I mean, it's great. I like all three of them, but the first one's great.
Mm-hmm.
The first X-Men's good. The first two X-Men are really good.
Yeah.
You can watch the first two and then not go any past that, because the first two,
I haven't seen a lot of X-Men movies.
the first two are good, and then they branched off and they did a lot of other things. Some was good, some was not so good. But yeah, X-Men 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
Two is probably a fan favorite with most people as far as the X-Men films go. But
yeah, mine would have to be is if you barely seen any of the Marvel movies and you're wanting to just kind of experience one,
mm-hmm.
for the average person, I would say watch the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, because those are
fun.
Those are fun movies. They're funny. They're good movies for anybody to watch.
I've told Ian, my film partner, that what's great about those is you don't really have to know anything about any of the other Marvel movies.
Mm-hmm. They were like branched off. They were out in space, like they had nothing to do with the Avengers.
And they really, the first one especially, well, both of them. The first one I remember came out, they said it really had the spirit of like the old Star Wars films.
Yeah.
Because it was aliens and spaceships and battles and fun characters, quirky characters, and crazy aliens, and those are good. Yeah, those are really good.
Mm-hmm. Plus, they came out with the new Guardians of the Galaxy game not too long ago. That was a fantastic game. Had an amazing story to it.
Cool.
They nailed it compared to the movies.
Yeah,
like it felt like a movie, like the quirkiness and constant.
Right. So they kept it consistent with the films.
Yeah.
And I'm not a game guy, but I know which one you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. It was really well made. But yeah, I think we're getting close to wrapping things up. Is there anything else you want to add last minute?
Not really. If you're not a Marvel fan, if you're anti comic books, you think it's just crap or kid stuff or garbage, just give it a shot. Just give it a shot. There's probably something for everybody. And you might find something that really just sort of makes your day and makes you laugh and have, like I said, have fun and just brings you some joy in some way. And I think that's like I said, that's worth it. Yeah. There's merit to that. Just if you find something and just enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. My thing is that I want to finish with is if you haven't given it a shot, just do yourself a service and just try it, because there's definitely a reason that it's as big as it is. Mm-hmm. Like they're doing something right. But yeah, that's my final thoughts on it. So gonna go ahead and wrap things up. Like I always say at the end of the episode, thanks for sticking around to the end. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any suggestions for us, leave it in the comments. New episodes every Monday at 9 a.m.
And we'll see you guys down the road.